You're so tired of being the problem. Every argument circles back to you, your reactions, your issues. You're beginning to wonder, is it me? Am I the problem? Or does it just feel that way because that's what I keep being told? Stay with me because it's far more complicated than you think. You know how in some marriages, there's always one person who seems to be struggling and the other person seems to have it all together? Well, there's actually a name for this. We call it the identified patient. One person gets labeled the problem person, the other one is the solution. And as long as the focus is on the problem, we don't have to look any deeper at what's really going on in this marriage. So if you're the identified patient, you're the one who's getting labeled. Too angry, too depressed, too bossy, too ADHD, too something. And your spouse, they truly believe that they are the healthy, stable one in the marriage. And in some ways that may be true, but it's not the whole story. Now, it doesn't mean you're equally responsible for everything, but when one person carries the majority of the blame and the other person virtually none, this tells us that something much deeper is going on. And if we don't address that, nothing changes. The person who's being blamed just keeps playing their role. The other person keeps managing the problem and resenting it, and the marriage stays exactly where it is. If you're the one who's being labeled, it doesn't mean it's true. You may be the one who's most visibly struggling, but it doesn't make you screwed up or broken. It just means you're struggling to hide what you're feeling, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because that makes you honest. Now, that doesn't excuse wrong behavior. If you're hurting your spouse and your children in some way, yes, that needs to change. But you are not the sum total of your worst moments, and you are not solely responsible for the state of your marriage. Now, if you're the spouse who sees yourself as patiently bearing with your spouse's faults, I know you didn't come here thinking this video was for you. You're here because you're exhausted and you've tried everything and you don't understand why nothing ever changes. That's real. I get it. And I don't want to dismiss what you're feeling, but I do want you to ask yourself, is it possible that your spouse's response is actually happening because of something between you, not necessarily caused by you, but being shaped by what you've created together? Because in my experience, the spouse who seems to have it all together often has the most unexamined patterns. The need to be the most reasonable one can be a type of control. The role of the long-suffering spouse can be a kind of power that you use. These are difficult things to see in ourselves, especially when what our spouse is doing is so visible and disruptive. And I'm not saying you're the villain, I'm saying it's a lot more complex than you realize. And that's actually a good thing because that gives us more to work with. I want to tell you about Kevin and Stephanie. Kevin is the problem, at least as Stephanie sees it. He's moody and unpredictable. And sometimes he's super engaged, but then it changes just like that and he goes dark and brooding. And she's left to have to manage everything. So as you can imagine, she's exhausted and she's done. But here's the rest of the story. Every time Kevin has tried to tell her how he really feels, she jumps in with a solution. She wants to fix things. So she's always trying to reframe what he says and tell him how it's not as bad as he thinks. And over 11 years, he's tired of it. He doesn't want to tell her how he really feels anymore because he knows she's just going to try to manage it. So he shuts down. And Stephanie, who's just trying to be genuinely helpful, doesn't realize that her need to fix things is part of the reason why he goes quiet. Do you see it? Do you see how Kevin is not just the problem and she's not just the solution? There's actually a system going on between the two of them that they're both caught up in. And until they understand that, nothing will change. So what do you actually do with this? Well, first you have to get curious about your own role, not point fingers. And this is really hard, especially if you spent years thinking you're the one who's holding it all together, or conversely, years of feeling like you can never do anything right. But the most productive question you can ask yourself is not, what is my spouse doing wrong, but what is my role in this? Because that's all you have power to change. And even the tiniest shift can interrupt this dynamic between you. Secondly, stop defending and start disclosing. In the heat of the moment, you're both doing the same thing. You're both reacting to each other instead of saying what you're really feeling on the inside. So instead of saying, you don't listen to me, how about right now I feel completely dismissed? Or instead of, you never take responsibility, I feel like I don't matter to you. Or you always shut down, how about, I'm scared that you're done trying. You're not conceding anything. You're not admitting fault. You're replacing your normal reaction with an underlying truth. Your spouse can't argue with what you feel. They can argue with what you do, your past track record, your tone of voice, but they can't tell you that what you feel isn't real. And if they are, we have a much deeper issue in this marriage that we're not addressing today, but it deserves its own conversation. But most couples I work with, when they lead with a feeling instead of an accusation, they change the entire tone of the conversation. Those 4 words, right now I'm feeling, are the most disarming words you have in your vocabulary. So use them. Third, I want you to replace your statement with a question. When things start to spiral, instead of saying something declarative, ask a question. Not a pointed one, not a rhetorical one, but a real one. Something like, what do you need from me right now? Or what are you feeling that I'm not seeing or picking up on? Asking a real question does far more to disrupt this dynamic than any length of explanation or defensiveness, because it signals to your partner that you really care, not in winning, not in managing, but in understanding them. If you're watching this and you recognize your marriage, maybe you're the one who's being labeled, maybe you're the one who's been doing the labeling. This is real and it's very complex, and it's exactly why I created Marriage in Bloom. But understand that you are not going to fix this through a self-help book. This is a systemic pattern that has to be seen and understood before it can be changed. If you want to do that, please reach out to me and schedule your free private marriage assessment. This is a 60-minute call with me. No pressure, just a conversation. But it might be the conversation that puts you on the path to changing this.